have a quorum of the select board. We're still missing John Langus, but we will start the meeting. My name is Claudette Brochu. This is the September 23rd meeting of the Norwich Select Board. Can everybody hear me okay? I know sometimes I have mic problems. Okay, just the opening statement for remote public meetings. As the chair of the Norwich School Board, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by Governor Scott as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and pursuant to Addendum 6 to Executive Order 01-20 and Act 92, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. In accordance with Act 92, there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting. However, in accordance with the temporary amendments to the open meeting law, I confirm that we are providing public access via Zoom. The public will be invited to speak. When the public speaks, please state your name and locatable address and wait to be addressed by the chair before you start to speak. Roger will be in just a second providing instructions on how to access the meeting. We have also started to include a telephone number for those who are unable to access the meeting. That's at the top of the agenda. All votes will be roll call. And so I am going to call the meeting to order. Just to point out, I'm Claudia Brochu, the chair. Roger Arnold is present. He's the vice chair. Rob Gear is present. John Langus is present. Mary Layton is present. Herb Durfee, our town manager, and Miranda, his assistant, and a few members of the public and
join the meeting.
Okay. Who just joined the meeting?
Bree did, and Mary has her hand up, I suspect, because she wants to let you know that you said a school board, but you are the select board chair.
Did I say school board?
Yes. It's okay.
Heaven forbid I would not want to be in that position at this time. Thank you for the correction. It is the Norwich Select Board. So Roger, can you just do your little intro?
Sure. So for folks who would like to make a comment during public comment or at the end of an agenda item, you go to participants, and if you're participating via Zoom, you click on participants, and then there'll be an option there to raise your hand, and then I will see that, and I will alert Claudia as chair for you to be recognized. If you're on the phone, please press *9 to raise your hand, and then I will unmute you. And that's it.
Okay, so first item on our agenda is the approval of the agenda. Anybody have any deletions, reordering?
Herb has his hand up.
Go ahead, Herb.
You can take the Mount Ascutney grant request stuff off the agenda.
Okay, thank you. Any other board members? I was going to ask that we defer the town plan action items since Mary is still working on that, and there was some, there's just nothing to discuss at this meeting. Everybody okay with that? I see Mary with the thumbs up. Okay. Any reordering needed, or everybody okay?
I was kind of curious about, John Langus produced like a very long memo that I think was called, I think it was a strategy memo, right? Is that fair to say? And so that seems like it might be a part of the capital budgeting or the budgeting conversation. And I just want to make sure that we all kind of agree that we can bring up some of that as part of that discussion, if that's okay. I don't know.
Yes, that was my plan, as well as I submitted a budget guidance memo that went out on Monday in the addendum that we could possibly include for discussion under that agenda item.
Great.
Okay. Item 2, public and select board comment. Any members of the public wanting to make a public comment?
Linda Cook has her hand up.
Go ahead, Linda.
I have two questions that I'm not sure you'll be discussing. The first one is regarding your template, very nicely, getting the information out to people and organized. As far as what information is needed for Zoom meetings, I had two other thoughts in seeing other meetings, is having the link for anyone that's presenting or any papers that are going to be presented at a meeting, if they could be attached to a link to it so that people can get those ahead of time. Is that clear?
I believe I understand you're asking other public bodies to include, if not, or with their agendas, links to material that would ordinarily be in a packet? Is that, or is it?
Yes, yes, it's material like last night, Energy Committee had a speaker that did a presentation, but I was not able to gather the information. So if that link could have been there, I would have been able to get it ahead of time.
Okay.
I don't know if it's possible. It's just thinking about the second part, which is what the Energy Committee has come up with a solution, is to also make sure you attach it to the minutes so the information is there for everybody.
Well, it should,
Just two thoughts.
it should definitely be attached to the minutes. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you. The second question, I don't know if you're discussing sidewalk tonight at all or pulling out anything out of the consent agenda. My question is, on your select board action items, number 11, it says create a long-range plan for the construction and maintenance of sidewalks, bikeways, trails, park, and ride lots. So is the Beaver Meadow project going to go forward before that is complete, because it's under the town manager for the year 2021?
I'm not sure I'm aware, or I don't know if I know what you're talking about. What's?
You have a list that's been put out that says select board action items, whose responsibility
It's
and
the
timing to be
implementation.
completed?
It's the implementation chapter of the town plan. It was just made into an Excel document by the former chair. That's just to clarify.
So just wondering your timing on completing a new construction before you actually create a long-range plan for all of the sidewalks.
The sidewalks, again, I'm unsure about what document you're referring to. That's number one. And number two, sidewalks are not on the agenda tonight in any way, shape, or form.
No, so that's why the question was, but if you're not sure, I mean, I didn't know how it was created. Roger's telling you how it was. So I just wondering if the Beaver Meadow sidewalk would be constructed before a long-range plan is completed for all of the sidewalks. That's the question.
I have no clue at this point in time if even Beaver Meadow is going to be constructed. So
Okay, no, that's fine.
So just to clarify for members of the public, on August 26th, there was a list of the implementation chapter action items that was put forth in a packet. This was in August 26th. And as part of that, one of the items that's ongoing or long-term is this sidewalk piece that Linda Cook just read to us. And so it's in the implementation chapter. It's assigned in part to the town manager's governance. And that's just what we're talking about. But yes, part of the August 26th packet.
Okay. But no,
Thank you.
sidewalks are not part of this agenda. There will be ongoing work about the town plan implementation, but not tonight.
Cheryl Lindbergh has her hand up, Claudette.
Go ahead, Cheryl.
Hi, Cheryl Lindbergh, 59 Koch Road. My question is regarding Tracy Hall and any eventual plans to reopen Tracy Hall. Just curious with the changes that have occurred around the state, the governor's, guidance, whatever. And is there a blood drive there coming up this month?
I'll leave that to her to answer.
So basically, Tracy Hall remains closed as it has. There's been an occasional opportunity for folks to come into the building, either by scheduling or in the instance of, yes, this coming Monday, I'm allowing the Red Cross in the gym only by the side entrance to conduct a blood drive. The only reason why I'm doing this is because of the essential need for blood in the area at this time frame, especially under COVID. I've had specific site visit with Red Cross beforehand, basically indicating they can't go anywhere else in the building. Those that are volunteers here today will be able to use the bathroom because they're here for a long period of time, but we'll have the appropriate cleaning throughout the day. And then as part of it also, I've purchased fans that go in the window, so we'll be creating cross ventilation in the gym as well. So, and then of course, Red Cross will be adhering to all the high standards required of, say, the CDC and all that with regard to protections like PPEs and everything along those lines. So that's really the only thing that I've allowed in here, other than an occasional short meeting with somebody from that standpoint, but we all have to clean up afterward or disinfect afterwards.
So just to follow up, Herb, any thoughts about a future opening of the building?
Not at this time. I mean, I'm always thinking about it, but basically a lot of my lead is taken from the governor, specifically around the time, each month around the 15th, he has a larger press conference or more where he sort of releases some of the bigger information. So, and that's the one where he extends the state of emergency. And that's, where'd you go? And then, so that's generally part of what I'm following. And as long as he kind of keeps that going, that kind of keeps me locking Tracy Hall down. If that gets relaxed, I'll consider what I may or may not need to do to sort of relax stuff to open stuff up variously for essential stuff. But when I do decide to open up further, it won't be to just come in and say hi to folks. There has to be a specific service that you have to come in for. And, it's not serving as a copy center. It's not coming in to just chat, but it's actually coming in for like deed research or, give something to the lister's office, something like that. But as you know, I've allowed, for instance, the grievances of the listers to go that. So there are certain things that I've allowed in as long as the particular rules are kept in place, like 6-foot distancing and disinfection.
Ernie Ciccatelli has a public comment. Claudia.
Ernie Ciccatelli, 49 Tiger Town Road, Norwich, Vermont. I just right now wanted to add, since at the beginning of the agenda, it says that this public comment section is for things that people want to say that are not part other issues. I want to know if the chair can let us know exactly when during the issues that we want to address it's time for the public to speak. And I'm being told that my connection is unstable. Hear me?
Your internet is unstable, yes. Is there a particular item you want to speak to?
There's two. There's the issue regarding the installation of a solar project on top of a ridge line. I think that's part of item number 3. And then the municipal grant application, which is item number 8.
Item number 3, depending on,
I just don't want to be disruptive. That's you know, in turn.
my intent is to pull the solar array out of the consent agenda so that we can have some discussion. And that would be the time after the board discusses it. We'll call for public comments after the board discusses it, and the same with the municipal grant agenda item.
Thank you.
So Mary was actually next,
Thank
and then Peter Orner.
Mary?
I just was very impressed looking on the listserv today by the excellent job that the Trail Committee volunteers did in sort of protecting the banks of the new bridge over the Charles Brown Brook. They just had to do a lot of work with mats and hay and you know, getting the proper conservation mix in place. I just wanted to commend them for that effort. That's it.
Thank you, Mary.
Yep.
And Roger, you said Peter was next?
That's right. Yep.
Go ahead, Peter.
Hi, my camera's not working. My apologies. I just wanted to.
Can you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, Peter Orner, 6 Moore Lane. I just wanted to make a quick comment to thank the select board and also Herb for okaying the scope that went through in the past months. And I think we had a very excellent meeting where we got a lot of wonderful input from everybody in town, many people in town. Sorry, I have a 3-year-old who's escaped. But I just wanted to be here tonight to keep this issue alive and make sure that that people are still aware of it.
We lost you, Peter.
I think just representing the group that I've been working with, we just want to make it clear that we think that there's a serious safety issue, and we believe that the survey results show that a lot of other people agree with us, as well as the having a priority that the town thinks more about walkability, especially in a road that is clearly multi-use, which definitely showed up on the survey. So again, I want to thank you for your attention to this issue, and that's all I want to say tonight.
Okay, thank you. Any other public or select board comments?
I think that is it. I see no hands.
Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion on the consent agenda?
I'll do it. I move to approve the consent agenda, but pull the item related to Ridgetop Solar that was submitted as correspondence.
Second.
Does the board want to discuss the solar array first, or just approve the motion and then discuss?
I didn't hear it.
I don't feel strongly.
Okay, let's move on the rest of the consent agenda and then talk about the solar project. Is that okay with everyone?
Mm-hmm.
So Mary, how do you vote on the consent agenda?
I vote yes.
Roger, how do you vote?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
And Claudette's a yes. So I don't know if there's any other, everybody can read the email chain that between myself, Herb, and Rod. And in my first email to Herb, I found it concerning that there was a solar project that was going up in a ridgeline protected area, and the dilemma it causes, because we have a town plan that looks to protect ridgelines, but yet that supports solar energy projects. And how do we come to some resolution on that, what I see as a dilemma? And I know that the application was incomplete. There was no visual comment on the visual impact. The application specifically stated that it was not a preferred site.
And also in violation of our zoning laws, from what I read, no?
Not
I don't know about that, but excuse me for a second. Just a point of order here. I'm not sure what we're doing here. So is this only in the correspondence because of your email to her?
No, the notice from the PUC to the town was in the packet under correspondence, in the original packet on Friday. Okay. So the PUC had to notify the town. We received that notification, I believe, on the 8th.
Okay. It seemed like this correspondence in the packet created a lot of confusion, created a fair amount of listserv activity. And Rod was very clear in this correspondence that he addressed it according to the town plan. The application was incomplete, and he denied the request for preferred treatment. So, you know, it seemed like there was a lot of concern that there was I mean, you just said you're concerned that there's a project going in on a ridgeline. So, you know, they applied, it was incomplete, and he properly denied their request. So I think we have to have this in the right context, right? But this also is not an agenda item. So I don't know why we would be talking about it other than to have a select board comment as part of the public comments.
Well,
go ahead, Roger.
Well, I mean, I think because it's in our consent agenda, so by virtue of that, it's part of our meeting, right? As we talked about when we approved the Climate Solutions Act resolutions, right? We have to be consistent, if nothing else. So I will offer that. So, but I do. That being said, like John, I did find the correspondence actually very clear and well handled, and you know, as it's supposed to happen given our town plan. But I do like that it appeared as correspondence, at least for a little bit, as people adjust to our town plan in practice, right? So it's always a good thing. Herb has his hand up.
Go ahead, Herb.
Just to add to John's statement, the reason why that letter, the original letter from the Public Utility Commission, is in your packet is that the Planning Commission and the Select Board separately are statutory parties to the Public Utilities Commission where there's a project proposed in our particular community. So by putting the notice in there, basically, you know, I've received the email for you. This is really in there to say, okay, if you guys wish to put in an entry of appearance to participate in the application process, that would be why this generally is in there. But I do know the additional stuff that went in there was in trying to reply to Claudette to give some background information of the existing application. And then Rod followed up with some other stuff. So I'm just trying to add a little bit more context to why stuff is in the packet.
And one of the reasons why I wanted to pull it out is because the town can, if the town so chooses, I believe, submit a letter or submit some testimony or submit something reinforcing the not a preferred site. If we so choose, and the deadline is October 5th.
Yeah, you'd have to put in, sorry to interrupt, you'd have to put in a notice of entry and then why, under what criteria you wish to participate. So that would be sort of the formal way to participate in this particular process.
So, but I'm not seeing that there's going to be support for, or maybe I'm misreading. Mary, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I think I am also a bit perturbed that there would be an application that would be submitted, even though it was incomplete, that would impact a ridge line. And I was thinking that a letter might be appropriate from the select board just to, you know, if we all agreed that this application is not consistent with our community values as expressed in our town plan. So I was thinking a letter, if we all agreed, would be a good statement for us to make. But procedurally, I'm a little somewhat flummoxed, I suppose, just bringing the subject up. Maybe if we did want to take an action on this, we would have an agenda item about it at our next meeting or something like that.
That will be too late.
Oh, that's too late.
That's the point.
Then it becomes awkward because it's not an agenda item. So we've sort of let this opportunity pass.
But we didn't really let it pass because we weren't noticed before. I mean, it came in between meetings and.
Well, not from anybody's lack of diligence, but just from the circumstances of when it came in, when our meetings were, when we were able to respond. You know, okay. From that point of view, it seems like something that, let's just say, would have been an opportunity to weigh in as a select board, that, you know, to say that we do support our town plan, we do support ridgeline protection, and apparently this application is, you know, in violation of that.
And the PUC could approve it anyway.
Or not.
Or not.
Maybe they would notice that it's not in compliance with our town plan. They might kick it back, but we won't know for a while, I guess. John,
did you have a comment?
Yeah, so I take the point that with the October 5th deadline, I think it's you know, perfectly acceptable to have this be an ad hoc agenda item. So if we're gonna do that, if we're gonna have this be an agenda item for tonight, I think it's super important to take a step back and talk about what this application was, right? So every other project that I'm aware of that we have passed judgment on has been a commercial solar array designed to make someone money, right? And it's been proposed by a landowner, one of our neighbors, who wants to host that commercial solar array so that they can make a little bit of money, or they can get free power or something, but it's a commercial endeavor, right? This is not that. This is a family's decision to put solar on their land or their house. I can't remember which on this. I guess it's land, or it probably wouldn't have even come up. It would have been automatically approved if it was on their roof. So an individual family's choice to use their land that they own to do their part with their money to reduce their carbon footprint as a family. And so I think, I certainly don't like the idea of saying that we're perturbed that someone would think to do such a thing on their own land. I love the idea of having people do this. And, you know, people have different views of what looks good and what doesn't. And so one of the compromises is we say, no, we don't want big solar arrays or wind farms on ridge lines. To me, there's a big difference between saying that and saying that you, a family, cannot choose to do this for your own family's benefit and your own contribution to this thing that many of us are trying to work on together. So I think it's super important to think of that context, that this is not a commercial project. This is an individual family who is trying to make a decision about their own life and their own way of living it and the current circumstances that we all find ourselves in.
And if it butts heads with the town plan, then why have a town plan?
Because I don't think the town plan is talking about when someone wants to go solar in their own house.
So
I bet it wasn't part of the discussion.
So there's a couple of things happening now. So Linda Cook has her hand up, Linda Gray has her hand up, Mary Lane has her hand up, and then Rod Francis has his physical hand up. So what would you like to do first?
I'm going to go to select board members first.
Okay.
So Mary, go ahead.
I tend to agree with you, Claudette, in that our town plan was created by the community to establish community values. One of our values is to try to, reduce our carbon footprint and do what we can as family, as individuals, as a business, in whatever way to reduce that. But I think that has to be balanced against the ridgeline protection. And to me, the visual impact, could be just the same whether it's a family or whether it's a business. So,
right. But no, I'm going to have my hand up. but if we read the email exchange, doesn't it say that even if this approval goes through, then it would go back to the Norwich zoning permitting process, of which a visual impact study would be required. And so I don't know what would happen from that, but I'm able to say, like, as per our town plan in the ridgeline, this request is denied. So maybe we should see clarity on that going forward. But like, I felt like this was kind of moot.
It's not a problem.
Yeah, but
The process will take care of it.
But anyway, the Lindas, Ernie, and Rod Francis have their hand up.
So I'm going to go first to Rod, who could possibly answer your question.
Hi, thanks. This is Rod Francis, the planning director. I'm hoping that I can answer the questions, and I apologize in advance for the potentially convoluted explanation, because there's two overlapping or maybe interlocking review processes going on here, and they don't always align, or it's not dovetailing here. It's some form of collision. So the easiest way to explain this is that, first of all, the project is relatively large for a domestic installation, and it's a net metering program, which means, like anybody else, even with a small rooftop type solar panel arrangement, the owners of the property and the eventual owners, the applicants, are going to sell their power, the solar power, to Green Mountain Power, and it will net out. So they'll sell electricity to Green Mountain Power, and they'll buy back electricity from Green Mountain Power, just like everybody else does in the region with Green Mountain Power as the utility. So it could be a family or not. That just happens to be the circumstances. So they've applied for a project of a certain size, which requires a certificate of public good to be issued by the Public Utility Commission. And the proposal is for a net metering arrangement with Green Mountain Power. To get the preferred rate, the purchasing rate from Green Mountain Power, one of the things that the Public Utility Commission wants to see is that the site for the application, the site for the project, meets the preferred site status of the particular town where the project is located. So that's why the applicant seeks to get a so-called letter of support or preferred site status bestowed upon the project by the town. So the contractors for the solar installation approached the town way back in July, and you saw all that correspondence, and I informed them that because the property was in the ridgeline, that they weren't eligible to receive preferred site status. And then there was some back and forth about, well, what does that really mean and how does that really work? And I explained that. Moving forward, the Public Utility Commission takes into account, and you can already see that when you visit their website, where they're tracking the application, that the project failed to obtain preferred site status from the town where the project is proposed. What this means is that the offer price from Green Mountain Power will not be as competitive as it would have been if it was a preferred site. That means that the applicants have to make a decision as to whether it's still financially viable for them to pursue it without this better rate. It looks like this particular household or entity is going to pursue the project regardless of the price that they're going to get paid from Green Mountain Power. That means that they could still get a certificate of public good issued to them by the Public Utility Commission, despite the fact that the project location is in the ridgeline. The Public Utility Commission doesn't take zoning documents as evidence in their proceedings. They expressly reject reading and using zoning regulations as part of their documents for review. So it's entirely possible that they will issue a certificate of public good. When they do that, and then it's time for the project, the people who want to build this still want to proceed, they're going to have to get a zoning permit from the town of Norwich, because the structure that holds the panels meets the definition of the structure under the zoning regulations. And then they will again be required to demonstrate that there is no visual impact. The piece of the land is large enough and the site is inside the boundaries of that parcel well enough that there may well be no visual impact, but they're going to have to demonstrate, they're going to have to go through a process of hiring a professional to do a visual impact analysis and submit those findings as part of their application, or their application for the structure will be denied. And if they proceed to do it, then they'll be in violation of the zoning regulations, and then we'll proceed with that process. So I'm hoping that that clears up what the steps are. We operate with the rules that we've got. The Public Utility Commission operates with the rules that they've got. It's up to the applicant and the owners of the property to abide by the regulations of both the Public Utility Commission and the town of Norwich. And we'll see how this plays out. And so I'm not at all, as a regulator and as a town official, I'm not concerned about the nature of the household, or whether they use the property all year round, or how much land they have, or all those kinds of circumstances. What I'm interested in is, does the application meet our local regulations, and have we conducted ourselves as an entity in the appropriate way? And so I think so far we have. It depends on the outcome. If I was to suggest that the town could make comment to the Public Utility Commission, it would be around this question of, we weren't notified as we were supposed to have been notified as recently as September the 5th by the applicant or their representatives of their complete submission to the Public Utility Commission, and alert us, so that it's a minor kind of maybe bureaucratic point, but there's been some steps in the process by the applicants and the parties working for the applicants that have been missed here. It doesn't necessarily impact the outcome terribly much, but going forward, we're going to have to wait for the Public Utility Commission to make a decision and see what the applicants do about that. And I hope this windy, lengthy explanation makes sense.
Yes. The Linda Cook, I think you were first. Would you?
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I think Rod has really helped clarify a lot of the questions, because I think it is a good opportunity for the select board to have comments up front and stating the facts of the notification and the other facts that have been discussed earlier, just to have a letter on the record. And we just, I guess, wait and see, as Rod is saying, as it goes forward.
Well, it seems to me that's two separate issues, Linda. There is no letter. There has not been a letter submitted to the PUC.
But I'm saying you guys, the select board, could submit a letter at this time.
And
And the reason I say that is because Roger pointed out that when you did the the other project that was under under that, the resolution, that you took an action, and so I'm hoping you would take an action and do a letter and get it on the record with the Public Utility Board.
and we'll see if that's the outcome.
Gosh, first time chairing, you guys have set precedent. Linda Gray has her hand up.
Go ahead, Linda.
Hi, thank you. Linda Gray, 175 Kerwin Hill Road. So I think Rod's explanation was helpful. I still have one question that I think is probably, I want to ask for clarification, and Rod may be the one to be able to give it. And my question is, my layperson's understanding of the ridgeline overlay area is that it doesn't prevent development in that area, but that it prevents development that can be seen from public roads in that overlay area. Is my understanding correct, or have I got it goofed up?
No, Linda, you've got it correct. That's right, which is why I mentioned that the parcel is so big, and you know, depending on how big the facility is, the solar panel facility is, it could be that it's not visible from a public road, in which case it's fine. But the onus is on the applicant to demonstrate that.
Okay.
So the summation is that it's not just on the surface. It's not plain and simple that their proposal would not be approved, but they just haven't shown you that it ought to be approved.
Right. Correct. They haven't done the work to show. So to be really clear, if they had responded right back at the beginning and said, "Oh, is that what you need? Okay," and then gone and had it done, they could have gotten a letter that said, "Although it's in the ridgeline, we've concluded that there's no visual impact, and we're happy to be for this project to go ahead." But they've not taken that path, so we're left with no other choice.
Ernie, did you have a comment?
Yeah. First, I just wanted to say that Rod's explanation gives me, some reason to be optimistic about how this is going to get resolved.
That must be wrong.
What's that?
I said, I must have been wrong.
I think you were right, but that's. I noticed in the application, in the letters that are involved here in the documentation, that Rod had deemed the application incomplete right off the bat. So we've already kind of got sort of a spear in the ground already about us. But I did want to say something
Unfortunately, though, Ernie, the PUC said it was complete.
Yeah, I understand that, but the point is now we have a reason to be able to object. That's what I'm getting at. Is the town the select board can object and can write a letter if they feel like now it's already on the record that that it's incomplete. A town official has already said it's incomplete, who's supposed to be reviewing that. But something I also wanted to say is that John was talking about that this is a family matter, so therefore we should be enforcing our rules and regulations the same way as we enforce them for commercial. And the fact is, our policies basically encourage development, and yet, despite that, we do not allow the most magnificent palaces on a ridgeline. We don't, why would we, private places? Why would we, encourage a commercial energy project on a ridgeline just because it's an energy project? I'll say, having wandered that property a number of times, I would be really surprised that there isn't another location that's maybe even better than the ridgeline. But that's just my opinion. And the point is that there's a bit of a discrimination in what John was talking about by saying that one class gets treated one way, another class gets treated another way. I think we need to have an equitable solution here, and ridgelines just should be off limits regardless. I mean, unless, you know, you can't see it, no, all the other aspects of elimination because of being on a ridge line apply. Or, you know, Rod has talked about, for instance, if you can't see it, well, then it doesn't matter. But if you can, it doesn't matter if it's commercial or a family, it should be treated the same. And if we had a thorough discussion of this in the planning commission, as a planning commission, I can say I would want to see the regulations equitably enforced.
Okay, so
Linda Gray has her hand up. I don't know.
My apologies. I forgot to take my hand down.
Oh, excellent.
So I guess I want to bring this back. Is there support from the board that we do whatever it needs to be done? Whatever Herb said, to submit a letter to the PUC outlining that it wasn't timely, that it's not preferred site, that there's been no visual, just reinforcing some of that material. John is a no, there's no support. Mary and Rob is shaking his head. I'd like a verbal.
Can I speak?
Yes, Mary.
Okay, I think no. I was thinking yes on a letter, but I think it might be better if the issue is addressed, you know, when it comes back and it's dealt with as a matter of our zoning regulations. Because I think the point would be for the landowners to demonstrate that it doesn't have a visual impact, and they'll get another chance to do that through the zoning regulations. And if they don't do that, I don't believe they'll get the permit, the local zoning permit. So to me, it's okay to not do this letter at this point.
Okay.
I think, Coletta, it just really underscores, like, you know, the question of like providing support for our planning commission and looking closely at the zoning laws. I mean, we haven't even talked about like what is the burden of proof, right, for this visual impact. We talked a little bit about when this town plan was approved, and like Rod answered a longer explanation for like what that meant. It could be, and he provided that in that correspondence in terms of, you know, who is qualified or like what set of qualifications enable someone to like assess a visual impact, right? And so I'm saying no because I trust in our process, but I think like if we care about this issue, we should be asking more questions, kind of like how you've done in this space tonight about some of the gray areas, like, you know, what is the burden of proof for a visual impact study? Like, who is really qualified to make that sort of lifelong assessment, right? So I think these are questions that, you know, we can take off list, but I trust in the process we have.
Okay.
But I support what you've done here, if that makes any sense. I think this was helpful.
And John, can you just reaffirm that you are not in support?
I am in actual opposition.
Okay. And Rob Gear?
Likewise.
Okay. So now is there a motion just to approve the correspondence related to this application? Because we have to do that.
I move to accept the correspondence associated with the solar project siting.
I'll second.
Second.
Made by Mary, seconded by Roger. So we will roll call that. Mary?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay, thank you, everybody. Moving on to the appropriation request by the rec department. Is there someone willing to make a motion? And then we can have discussion. Mary, go ahead.
I move to authorize the expenditure of $3,958 from the John Gerard Fund for the purchase of chairs in accordance with the request by the Gerard family.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved by Mary, seconded by Roger. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll roll call. Mary,
Yes.
Rob? You're muted. You're still muted.
In a different application. Yeah.
John?
Aren't you our IT guy?
I know. John?
Yes.
Yes. Roger?
Yes.
And Brochu's a yes. The next item on our agenda is the Norwich School District MOU with the Norwich Finance Committee. Is there someone? Everybody's shifting around on my screen. How come it's stop moving? Someone willing to make a motion and we can have discussion?
I move to approve the draft Finance Committee charge as included in this meeting's packet.
I'll second that.
So the charge was in the packet, but the MOU was not. Or it was the other way around, one of the two.
The charge was in the packet, I believe. If I'm remembering correctly. Most of his edits that said, you know, town finances and school finances. It was a red line thing.
Correct. It was the charge is in there. Sorry, I just want to make sure. I believe that there were no.
I thought the school board had.
I believe that there were no edits to the MOU from what we last discussed at our last meeting. It should have been in the packet though. So these changes came from the last school board meeting where they requested these changes.
But the MOU is not there.
Correct.
Sorry, I didn't
pick up on that. Sorry, guys.
I didn't pick up on that either. So that kind of makes this discussion moot. And we'll bring it.
Should we table it?
Could someone?
Yeah, we should probably table it so that I can just make sure that they didn't have any changes to it and have the MOU in the packet. I apologize. That was my bad.
Can he share it on his screen temporarily just to go over it while you're here?
Yeah. Well, but I'd still need Tom to confirm that there wasn't any requested change to the.
And I thought that the school board had made some changes.
Well, they made changes to the charge, which is what's in the packet.
No, I thought they made. Sorry.
Can we talk about maybe the charge, or is there a way that we could have a conversation that sets us up well for an easy agenda item at the next meeting? Anything like that?
I mean, the conversation would be that they really want to have our finance committee participate in the review of the school board budget. And I think that, you know, the reasons that we didn't do that at the outset, you know, have the finance committee is well established now, and they're all seem to be happy to add this to their workload.
Yeah. I'm looking at this charge and their addendum.
So you're looking at the school board packet?
No, I'm looking at the finance committee charge that was in our packet.
Yes.
And the third bullet point, never mind. I'm fine with the charge, but that's.
Emmanuel Tessone has his hand up. Manny.
Hi.
Name and locatable.
This is Emmanuel Tessone, 428 Hawk Pine. And I am the current chair of the Finance Committee. I just want to state a couple of things. One is that as far as I'm aware, no one has reached out to any of us to discuss this MOU. So I want to make sure that everyone is aware of that. And two, at what point does the select board plan to contact us to discuss these conversations? We first found out about them at the last Norwich School Board meeting when it came up in their agenda.
Good
And
point.
so at the last meeting of the Finance Committee, I'd like everyone to know that we added this for discussion, and the extent of the discussion was, well, we don't really know anything about this, so we'll wait to hear about the details. So just to clarify, I don't have a good sense of how the members of the Finance Committee feel about this until we have more information about the details and we're able to discuss it.
Go ahead, John.
I was under the impression several months ago in discussions with Omer that this question had been posed when we started. I mean, we've been talking about this with the school board for over a year now. And I was under the impression that back then he had taken it to the committee, and that, I mean, obviously there are different committee members now.
I think that's the issue. There are different committees.
But that people had said, yes, we're happy to add review of the, it's simply adding the same sort of tasks that you do now for the town, you would be doing as well to the school board, and then with the Hanover committee, you would occasionally look at the Dresden budget. So originally we did not do this because we thought this was probably part of why we couldn't ever get anyone to be on a finance committee, and why the finance committee died, because it was just too much to ask a group of people to do. And so we reformed the committee without that as part of the charge for that reason. And so my impression was that you guys had talked about this and that people were saying, no, it's fine, we're happy to do that. So is that just incorrect?
That's correct, to the extent that that was discussed when there were different members on the committee. And I don't believe that there's anything, I don't believe there's an issue with adding this to the charge. I just think that we would like to have a little bit more information and then be able to discuss it as the committee to confirm what is it that we can actually deliver and do, right? And I think it's just really more about being brought into the discussion so that we have a bit more information as to what would be expected in a bit more detail. I just
Roger,
wanted,
you had a, sorry, Manu. Roger, you had a comment?
Well, I just think, so, because I watched the school board meeting and I took some notes, and then I know that Cheryl has her hand up and she may very well remind us about the articles of incorporation and the storied history with these committees, which is always appreciated and is some grounding. But, you know, and I'm loath to add process into this because, as John points out, it's been over a year, but I wonder if we at this point need some kind of special meeting just to, you know, do as sort of Manu has sort of proposed, which is just like, you know, get sort of a shared governance, a shared consensus on this, and then really come back and like get this approved really quickly. You know, that doesn't have to be a very long meeting, doesn't have to be elaborate. It could just, you know, be very, but I think, yes. So that's my suggestion. And I put that forth to the group.
Cheryl, you had a comment?
Cheryl Lindbergh, 59 Koch Road. Yes, I would agree with what's been discussed, except for one point on John's comment. It wasn't the workload ever that discouraged people. It was the process for getting members to the committee that discouraged people. But that's all.
So I don't know if we need a special meeting, but I do think that the draft charge for the Finance Committee and the MOU should go to the Finance Committee. Just for some, again, since we do have almost I would say more than a 50% changeover in the finance committee personnel. And so that everybody's singing off the same sheet of music.
I agree, and I'm happy to take the lead on that. We should table this, and so
Yeah.
I'm happy to take the lead on that and come back with the next agenda for the next meeting.
Would it make sense as process, just to be really clear, would it make sense that John attend a finance committee meeting and we could suggest that be one of their agenda items, or
well, they only report to us, so we can tell them to have an agenda item if we want.
Right.
So
we can tell them to do that, and then you should attend it.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Yeah.
Does that work for everybody?
Yes, sounds good.
How about you, Manu? Does that work for you?
Yeah, of course. Of course,
Okay.
that's great. And so our next meeting is next Tuesday at 7 p.m. And the draft agenda will be updated to include this as the main subject of discussion.
Thank you very much.
All right, thanks a lot, Mano. I apologize.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Brings us to our next item. Actually, do we have, Herb, process question for you? Do we have to have somebody rescind their motion since a motion was made and seconded?
All you would just have to do is the mover and the seconders withdraw their motion and second.
Okay, I withdraw my second.
Who was this?
John was the first. I was the second. John moved.
Sorry, yeah, I withdraw.
And Mary, okay. So we're good.
Okay.
Moving on. The Town of Norwich and the Norwich School District MOU. Behind the scenes, I've been having a discussion with Herb about MOUs and who signs and at what point, and that's a further discussion. But this MOU is just, I wanted to bring it to the board just as an informational piece only, and to be able, as a forum for select board members to ask Herb a question if they have a question about the MOU. So pretty short and.
I have a question.
Yes, Rob.
Yes, is this still the latest? Because I attended a very helpful school board meeting, it turns out, where there was some question about whether or not they wanted to make some changes. So I guess my question is this still, what's in our packet is still the most current, and it has been executed?
Yeah, this is the latest one. It just doesn't have the signatures on it. I have my typical Adobe version that passed around and got all the signatures. The last signature came in after the packet went out. So, yeah.
Any other select board comments or anybody else comments? I have one question, Herb. Does this remove the town from the upkeep of the green and the school grounds, the DPW crew?
I'm gonna have Bree, can you help me on that? Because she's the most well-versed in this whole thing in terms of specifically what we're doing.
So no, it does not. This is an addendum to the original MOU, allowing them to use the forest, and they are paying for the upkeep of the forest with Longview Forestry.
Okay. And okay.
But it does not change the original MOU. It's just an addendum.
Because that had been part of the school board discussion, and I just wanted to be clear on that.
No, you are correct. And they decided to do an addendum and to only extend it for one academic year. And we can talk about it again when that term's up.
Okay, thank you. If
Yep.
there are no further comments by anybody, we will move on to the next item on the agenda. This is the Planning Commission request to apply for a municipal planning grant. We'll do motion first and then discussion. Is there anybody willing to make a motion?
I'll do it. I move to approve the fiscal year 21 municipal resolution for municipal planning grant as included in this meeting's packet, and to authorize the town manager to apply for a looks like FY municipal planning grant.
Is there a second?
Second.
So motion made by Mary, seconded by John. If we could, board okay with Rod doing a little,
Blurb.
yeah, a little blurb, or are we comfortable with what's,
Okay.
anyway, Rod, please give us a little blurb.
That sounds so inviting. Thank you, everybody. Let me just see if I can get the right thing up. So anyway, last year we weren't eligible to apply for a municipal planning grant because we didn't have a approved town plan from the Regional Planning Commission. So now we have an approved town plan, and that makes us eligible to apply for the municipal planning grant, which is a small grant program that really is the backbone of doing planning projects across Vermont, particularly for smaller to medium-sized towns such as Norwich. So you'll recall that in the town plan, we spoke about getting back the ability to use municipal planning grants to do more planning research and planning work. And we also identified the importance of understanding how our current zoning and subdivision regulations work and how well they implement the policies and goals of the 2020 town plan. So the purpose of this planning project, hopefully supported by the municipal planning grant for the year 2021, is to research and make recommendations about the so-called density factor calculator, which is an embedded component of the subdivision regulations. And if people want me to go into more detail about what that is and how it works, I'm happy to do that. But the short version of this is that we're very happy and excited to be able to apply for a municipal planning grant and proceed with work that we've identified as being important in the town plan.
Any select board questions? John?
Quick question on your resolution. So the resolution names as the alternate Jen Frank, and the instructions there lay out specifically the titles of the people that can be designated as that alternate. I would recommend that we replace her with maybe Claudette, because chief of police or deputy town manager is not one of the things listed in that can be the alternate.
Right. Can you help me out, John? By I didn't draft the resolution.
Yeah, no, it's a set resolution that you have to adopt, and you just fill in some blanks. So it's 3B, and it says the person that we've filled in the blank is either the chief executive officer, a select board member, the town manager, the city manager, or the town administrator.
Right.
So I think for you know, I think just to make that proper, it should be a select board member, and I would recommend our fabulous chair.
That was exactly my comment, and I think this is a really well thought out grant application, but my vote can't move forward if that's included.
Yeah, and I'm fully in support of the grant.
Great. Okay. So can I just check with Herb? Did you catch that change to the resolution, or?
Yeah. Yes, because I filled in all the blanks originally, so I know exactly what they're talking about. I will go on the record as disputing that, being against that, but I understand what you're doing and not going to hold that up from that standpoint. But I seriously question that when I'm out away, Jennifer is my deputy and she serves in my capacity.
For sure. And absolutely she will do that for this grant, right? But
I totally.
If someone needs to sign something for this grant, I think it's important that it be someone listed in that list.
Okay. So,
is Claudette willing to be that person?
Yeah, that's
okay, good. All right.
Any other board discussion or comment?
Ernie Ciccatelli has a public comment, Claudette.
Go ahead, Ernie.
Okay. Just wanted to say that there are some issues with the municipal planning grant application. And it's because there are problems with the town plan itself. It's on the record now that a member of the Public Planning Commission has noticed that the town plan has the same flaws that in decisions and output from the wastewater work group had, which is specifically open meeting law violations, which made the wastewater group's work void. And that has been dealt with, of course. The process of developing the town plan incorporated work done by work groups, just like the wastewater work group, that had no public warnings of the meetings, no minutes, no public participation. And the process did not adequately reflect the public input or desires, which may have made the town plan void or voidable. Another problem with the application is that it incorporates at least one statement for which there's no evidence whatsoever, that being the statement that Norwich is in a region with an estimated shortfall of 6,000. The only real estate agents have made that statement. There's no proof of it or proof of its truth. Another issue is that the town plan calls for more intensive residential development, which is a questionable direction for the town, given that in surveys, the majority of respondents favored no or little development. Only a tiny minority favored intensive development or anything like it. Therefore, the town plan again. This is related to the work groups issue that developed the town plan. I'll have to say that my own opinion of having worked with it for 15 years in the Development Review Board. What I call the density algorithm, I think Rod calls it the density calculator, it does a very good job of controlling density in an equitable and constitutional manner. And then if it has any shortcomings, that they can be addressed readily to resolve those shortcomings. One means of resolving the shortcomings, which had been stripped out of the town plan by the select board when it was on the day that it approved the town plan, was the language alluded to in the language linking population, carbon dioxide emissions, forest blocks, and forest carbon dioxide absorption. That could easily be, that's an example of something that could be easily incorporated into that calculator that would help it even be a more effective way of, instead of old-fashioned zoning, which old-fashioned zoning is very frequently fought on constitutional basis by landowners. It's kind of been discredited up to a point in that manner. There are other things, adjustments that could be made to the calculator, but it is a very effective and very fair way of controlling density and development.
Ernie?
I gotta say, just for those reasons alone, there are probably others as well that other people might notice. The municipal grant application should either be revised to include consideration of these concerns, or it should otherwise be abandoned. That's
Ernie?
my opinion. Yes?
Sorry. Sorry to interrupt, but this the resolution was brought before the Planning Commission, who approved it. So I'm not going to not vote on this because it has been approved by the Planning Commission.
Okay.
To submit the,
I
to
just have
submit
to
the
bring
grant.
it up.
I didn't say that again.
I said, you guys have to do what you're going to do. I mean, I have to bring it up
Okay.
at least.
Yeah. So thank you for bringing it up. Any other comments? If not, then we need a blah, blah, blah. Sorry, I completely lost my train of thought. So can we amend the motion to just to identify the change that was made by John, the recommended change to substitute my name for Jen Frank's name. That
Oh, yes.
okay with everybody?
Yes, should we state that though? Like
Yes.
I move to amend the motion to approve the fiscal year municipal resolution for municipal planning grant as including it in this meeting, but also to change the signature page for the, or signature position for the alternate, and to authorize the town manager to apply for an FY municipal planning grant. I don't know if that did.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, we will do a roll call. Mary?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
John? You say it again. You're well, I can say I could read lips, but every time you said yes, you were muted. You're right.
Plus, my mustache covers my lips anyway.
Oh, God.
So that was a yes from John Langus, and Claudette's a yes. So.
Rod Francis has his hand up, Claudette.
Who does?
Rod Francis.
Yes, Rod.
Thank you, everybody. And then can I just have a question? Did I hear you right when you decided to push off the discussion of town plan items later on in the agenda? Is that what you decided?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, on that note, is there anything else on the agenda that you want me around for?
I don't believe so.
I think that's kind of it, right?
You really don't want to hang around?
Well, you
This
know,
is a stimulating discussion.
I have dogs to put to bed. What can I say? All right.
Okay. Thank you.
Good night.
So that brings us to our, Jackie, is that a hand up or no, I guess that was a shut off. That moves us to brings us to our break. So it is 7:47. You have a 10-minute break, 7:57. See you back then. Looking for Mary and Rob. Okay. Excuse me. Okay, so resuming the select board meeting for the 23rd of September. Our next item on the agenda is the revenue expense report for August. And I am going to turn it over to Herb.
Thanks. In your packet, you had the balance sheet, the typical looking balance sheet, the revenues and expenditures through the first 2 months of the fiscal year, as well as the balances on the designated funds. I haven't had a chance to work on kind of what we talked about at your last meeting when Cynthia was here, just because of me being gone for a week, Miranda gone out of the office. So I haven't had a chance to really work on stuff, but, and Becky's been out this past week. But essentially we're generally on target right now. Just as a rough perspective, sorry, I'll get to the page. As a rough perspective, you kind of want to be around just almost 17% of budget this time of year. If you fully did budgeted type of expenditures, total expenditures, you're about 645,000. At 17%, you'd be about $818,000. So right now you're running about 13% of budget, a little bit under, but it's way too early in the fiscal year to start making those kinds of true comparisons. The revenues, obviously all the taxes were billed out. The problem that I have with the way that our system works is that we treat the taxes as kind of an encumbered expense that goes in there automatically. So when you look at the actuals under the revenue side of things, you immediately see $16 million. Obviously, we haven't received $16 million, but that's the way that the NEMRC system works from that standpoint. When I came back from vacation, I'm trying to work with Cynthia on figuring out a better way, if there's a different report or a different style thing that can show the actual tax dollars that we've received, because I think that's much more meaningful in the grand scheme of comparing it with the expenditures. So I'm working on that a little bit with regard to that. And just one point, there are a couple changes that will have to occur. For instance, on the revenue page, the first page of the 19, which is under the additional number 9, it's the second line, property tax, other monetary articles. Typically that says 0. It should have whatever was approved for the other monetary articles. All that simply is just a journal entry taking that amount out of the 16 million line item and moving it down there. So it won't change anything, but we have to push that down there to show that that's the billing for the taxes that goes in that line item. So that's one thing that I picked up on already that I always have to do every single year. Other than that, unless you have some particular questions, that's what I would offer for tonight.
Any select board questions?
So I have just a general question, Herb, and I apologize. Like, my question is not a result of this report, so I appreciate if you have to freestyle. But so has the last fiscal year been closed out? Is that right?
The last fiscal year has been closed out. At the last month, I gave you the pre-audit final numbers.
That's right.
You just have to have your tongue in the cheek at that point, because once the audit, there are journal entries that are being made as the audit is put together. So ultimately, when the audit comes out, that will give you your final stuff. But at least in terms of a pre-audit final numbers, your last month report had those numbers in there.
Okay, and I should have asked this last meeting, but I think that meeting was really packed. So obviously there are a lot of unanticipated expenses with COVID. So what would you say, this is like just an opportunity for you to answer this any way you want. What would you say was, what work did you have to do, or what went well for you to be able to pivot and make and be successful in coming under budget as we did?
Well, I think the greatest thing is obviously the realization of the accounts receivable on the July 1 FEMA funding, because that grant is formally closed out. And we did that basically in less than 3 years, whereas Irene took about 7 years to do. So I think a lot of credit goes to a lot of people in trying to pull that together and get those funds in the door. I think that, yes, as much as I hate, we had the BEC, the scam issue, but I think with the diligence that everybody did, we were able to get back a little bit of the money. And as much as I don't like to take insurance money to deal with stuff, because all it does is drive your rate someday, but we were able to recover back most of that. Obviously, there's some professional services that go with that, but that really helped to not have a major underfunded budget, if you will, from that standpoint. And then clearly the diligence of the department heads, when I started talking to them last December to say, you better start holding the line, because we were really nervous about another severe winter and DPW being out there quite a bit, that all the department heads pulled together and tried to save the dollars where they could. But primarily, I think it's just attention to the budget, and then the realization of the FEMA accounts receivable.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any other select board questions? I have a couple. So what have we collected for taxes to date, or at the August 26th deadline?
So well, they're still coming in, frankly. but because of the number of folks with revised tax bills and even people are still late filing their homestead declaration, that there are some changes that are coming in. But basically, that's part of, to get the specific number, I don't know. That's why I talked to Cynthia after I came back from vacation, but with Becky gone for her father's burial, that's what she and I are going to work on next week, so I can give you that true number to know what's coming in. And part of that relates to the fact that there are still some monies that are owed the school district. To date, they've received $5.5 million. The whole, if you basically just look at the $16 million and have that, that's essentially what should be on the books. But I know we're not at that total level, but I'm going to have that number more succinctly for you as soon as Becky comes back. And that's why I'm trying to find a different report too that can give us that more quickly. Because just again, the way it does it, it shows it as an encumbered figure rather than an actual figure. And I just need I don't have the software on my computer to make the kind of report. So that's why I have
there's been.
Well, I can figure. I think with Cynthia, if I can get hold of Cynthia tomorrow, I can try to get a particular figure and then follow up with you after tonight's meeting, because I know that's it's a number of interest to me too, because I need to pay, if there's any additional money that we owe the school district, I need to get that over to them in the next payable. I don't want to be holding any school money that I don't have to.
A follow-up to that, if I may.
Yeah,
sure.
So but what the number, you mentioned the encumbered number. So that number is in this revenue report, is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
And I thought
the first line of the revenue sheet is basically the total amount that was billed out for taxes. If you take about half of that, then you know what you're supposed to bring in for each installment. But it's always a little bit different than that. And then as some of the tax payments come in, there are delinquent taxes sometimes that come in, so that it can be worked out. I just have to figure out how to get the best report for that.
So Claudette's question can't be answered by this report.
Correct.
Okay.
So I'm confused, puzzled, concerned that we don't have some kind of approximate number of what we've collected for taxes as of the deadline. That's just a comment.
Yep, I understand.
Then my second question kind of swings back to Rogers. Did we get, or prior to the funding for the COVID expenses, the grants from the state, having them extend out the deadline, did we get our application in by the previous deadline?
Yes, so the deadline that the state put out there is a false deadline. FEMA has no deadline out there. I spoke specifically to the officials, but for the deadline that the Department of Emergency Management put out there, we definitely met that deadline for the expenses that we had. But it was interesting, but again, that it was actually a false deadline. There is no deadline for those kinds of funds from FEMA.
And my other questions, under the, I can find, it might take me a minute to find the page here. It's under the expenditures. It's under the rec program wage expenditure line item. We're at 83% of budget. And I'm searching for the page, so that just didn't seem as though that could possibly be correct, but.
So the program, that's the $38,000, and we have $31,370 as expended, which is 82.55%.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yep, that predominantly relates to the summer rec programs that went on in the July-August timeframe. But I'll check on that to make sure that's not a bad number.
Okay. Then my second, under I looked back last year under the Cemetery Commission. We have nothing budgeted, but we're spending a bunch on mowing. And when I went back last year, I couldn't find that. Okay, it's on page 13 of 19. Purchase services under Cemetery Commission. Nothing budgeted, but we've spent $8,333.
Yep, and that would be the mowing, and I can check on that again to make sure there isn't a journal entry or something that's incorrect there.
Yeah, and since it's that, I would also be interested in knowing if that was a bid item, since I think it, anyway.
That would pertain to the Cemetery Commission, not to us.
Right.
Right.
But I can ask the question.
And then under DPW, there's it's under insurance payments, it's under Medicare. It says we budgeted nothing for the Medicare taxes for DPW. I'm looking for the page.
14.
Page 14.
Yeah.
So that clearly, that seems to me to be another error somewhere, since that tax isn't, it only shows up in Medicare as not being, I mean, under DPW as not being a budgeted item, which I thought that came out of the projected salaries,
Yep.
et cetera, et cetera.
No, I'm just making sure that's not one of those combined line items. I think what it is
On page
the
15 is
FICA and Medicare, if you look at the town report, shows it as one line item. So that Cynthia Stoddard helped me do this, the printing of this, so it may be shown. It normally that I think in that instance the FICA and the Medicare are a joint line item rather than the two separate line items. But I'll check on that.
Yeah, because it wasn't the same reporting last year's budget or last year's reports.
Yep.
So that's it from me. So if there are no further questions, we'll move on to the next item, which is operational and CIP budget guidance. We have John's memo, which I'm going to have to try to pull up. And just as a start to this discussion, it just seemed to me that we as a board should make or try to make quite clear what we would be willing to, or what guidance we would want to provide to the town manager in terms of what kind of budget increase or tax increase we are willing to bear, both in terms of the capital improvement plan and the operational budget. It seems to me that really that the department managers and the town manager would need that information to be able to put together a budget without us going back and saying, fix this. So that's how I kind of want to phrase the discussion. Do any select board members have any thoughts about where we might direct our town manager in the budget for fiscal year 2022? And I don't see anybody. I'm still scrolling to find John's memo. So
John has his physical hand up, and then Mary has her Zoom hand up.
Uh-huh.
John has his physical hand. Go ahead, John.
Oh, he's muted.
I have liked our process over the last few years of requesting a austerity budget to come alongside of the actual proposal. I think that that has been getting better and more substantive each year as people get used to that request. I think it's a little bit artificial to just start from the conclusion and to say, you know, write me a story that ends this way. I think that that's a tad unfair to the town manager and his managers. We don't know exactly what they have on their plates. We don't know exactly what they have that they see on the horizon. So I would like to see what they think that they need. I mean, I think maybe we've done the 10% thing long enough that we could add a third piece and say, show us what you would have if you had to cut 10%. Show us what you need and show us what you want. And have, you know, like presentation's one of the challenges of this. We're not overwhelmed by 15 spreadsheets, but I think you could maybe just do the one spreadsheet and then have a minus, you know, the 10% down line, the want line, and the need line, just as 3 columns on the same spreadsheet, personally. But that's my initial thought on the Claudette memo.
Roger?
I think for me, like, I can't, you know, pick a number per se, but I think that this past year has made clear some problems that need to be addressed in a budgetary way. I think like our infrastructure, our technological infrastructure, you know, really needs to be addressed. And so I would not be intimidated by a heavy-handed number and seeing an increase in operating for increases in that. I think any increases that don't come in operating, I expect to see in designated fund approvals. Not necessarily just in terms of workstations and our servers, but I would also expect to see some kind of increased automation and website improvements. I think we're working remotely at this point. There's increasingly increased demands on what kind of automation is expected out of town government. So I would expect to see increases at that. And I would not be intimidated by numbers. I think elsewhere, I think we'll get into this with the John Langus discussion. I would like to create a working group for green infrastructure around our vehicles. I think a green fleet policy and a working group around that, that needs to become a guiding directive for how vehicles are purchased. They need to introduce an exemption process. All that may very well trigger money. And then I think elsewhere, I think in times of austerity, we need to make sure that we're adding money to things that will improve people's lives. So we have an affordable housing strategy. We have a housing strategy that was part of the town plan. I expect increases to the Affordable Housing Fund. And then I expect increases similarly in some. I would like to see REC's formulation around it, but I would like to see some more capacity built around that, potentially with staffing, increased part-time staffing. I would be fine with that. And I am fine taking money from the police department. So that is my 4-minute talk.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Mary.
I would just like to, a couple of years ago, I think when we were in the midst of the, when the storm damage hit hard, we were stripping out some money from our designated funds. I'd like to make sure that we have put away enough, especially towards vehicles in the police department, in DPW. Also, Tracy Hall, I think that designated fund has been neglected. So I'd like to think and to probably fund the sidewalk maintenance fund, which Steve Flanders had done a study for future maintenance, finding that there's a certain figure that's reasonable to put away each year for when you have to actually replace sidewalks. So just like to make sure that the maintenance of what we have is adequate and that we don't get stuck taking out a loan for the relatively small things that we have to do. I mean, when you compare a dump truck cost to Tracy Hall, they're not exactly apples and onions. You know, there are some differences of scale that make it a little bit harder to plan for what might be an expensive renovation of Tracy Hall as compared to buying a dump truck, even a secondhand dump truck that's replaced by a electric one, which is what I think we all hope to do. So I'd just like to make the future maintenance be rational. I also think that it is hard. It is hard to just say that you're going to stick to a certain figure as far as the tax increase. We should probably have some boundaries, but I don't think we could come out tonight and actually say what it is. But I think we should keep it in mind because the taxes are high. We expect a lot of services, but then we have to pay for them. So that's what I have to say.
Rob, any thoughts?
It's my first year on a budget, and I'm looking forward to getting advice and consulting with other board members as to the process, because it's all very foreign to me.
John, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to add just a little, you know, in line with what I was saying earlier. There's some very different possibilities that are coming down the line as a result of the election, right? So you could very easily see a situation where we have a budget crisis because of the things outlined in your memo, Claudette. With a different outcome, you could also imagine a situation where there's a lot of stimulus that's pushed through to state and local governments. So one thing I'd like to see in the budget is lots of focus on what are projects that we'd like to see that we're not prepared to fund right now, 100%. We don't have the money to do that, but we've got them teed up. We know what we would like to do if those funds become available as ways to stimulate the local economy. We'd have great ideas to put that to work, because that, I think, is hopefully at least as likely as that we will be in a budget crisis after November.
Okay, and given that that's probably not going to be, we're not going to be able to do that for fiscal year 20. Well, we could, I suppose.
Why not?
Yeah. No, I rethinking. So is there, I guess I'm,
So Claudette, if I may.
Sure.
Are you, since you had the benefit of like hearing all of our answers, do you see, do you see there's like moments of intersection or agreement between all of our answers? Anything that like would go to the top? I saw Herb was taking notes, like, you know, we kind of all said different things a little bit, as is often the case. And so I wonder, like, what are the modes of agreement? I think also the elephant in the room too is like the school budget, right? Like, you know, I'd love to answer your question directly and say, like, I think a 2% increase for things that promote social welfare, like housing, like green technology, are good things. But if the school is projecting like a 4.5% increase, like that's not, you know, there's that too. The town once again sort of, you know, suffers in austerity. So I guess my question to you is, do you hear, and you don't have to answer it.
I'll answer it.
Do you see any moments of agreement and between our answers?
yes, I see you all saying that my, this is what I heard, might not be what you were saying, that I hear you, I heard you all say, with the exception of Rob, um, you really don't see the necessity of curtailing or level funding a budget and finding some of those um, savings in various departments to fund uh, like the IT work that we all acknowledge need to be done. I don't hear, I kind of hear same old, and not a direction to Herb or to the department managers to critically look at your spending. I kind of hear it, but we know, and I disagree with John in this case. I don't think that every time we've asked them to come to for the department heads to come up with cuts to their budget, the knee-jerk response has been, the only way I can achieve this is to reduce staffing. And I'm not. I don't think
that's I don't think that's a fair characterization.
That's mine, though, John. So.
Well, we don't. I think that's a good unifier. Nobody wants reduced staffing necessarily.
Right. So, and I think we've got a whole host of things that, yes, would we like to do? Yeah. Can we do it? No. And I'm not sure I'm hearing the no.
I don't think you are hearing a no.
So, I mean, so yeah, I'll leave it at that.
So are we, okay. So are we
talking? I guess I would ask Herb, what are you coming away with this from? What's your take on this discussion?
So my take on the discussion is that we are in an austerity situation but we do need to be cognizant of that there are some folks that are hurting out there, and that we need to be sensitive to the budget and what we put forward, both in an operational and a capital budget process. But it's fair to recognize that there may be some line items or funds that could help with things, Citizen Assistance Fund, Affordable Housing Fund. There may be things to deal with that. But the key, and clearly I heard that infrastructure designated funds, we need to be cognizant of what's going on with regard to the future. But I think what comes with that is the actual justification for what is coming forward to you, and that we need to spend the time that we need to make sure that whatever number we're putting forward on a line item or a fund, that it has the proper justification for it. So we may be putting something forward to you that you might not necessarily like, but it's the best foot forward in the description that we need to. Obviously, it's you ultimately in the decision process as to what goes forward to the voters, but I think having some of that information in front of you to help you in making that particular decision and some of those difficult ones is going to be very helpful. I do hear that clearly the process, I want to say exercise, but I understand it's not an exercise, but the austerity scenario, the 10%, continues to make sense. I do think that each year that I've had to deal with that, yes, there are some similarities as to what comes forward, but I do think that each year there's a little bit of a different take on it, or some nuances to it. So I do agree that that's the process that we go forward on. I'm more focused a little bit on not just that part of it, but what we actually need from a department head standpoint with regard to operational and capital budget stuff. In sort of focusing on what John said with the want, I think I would be more focused on what he was talking about with regard to, hey, if there is some stimulus funding that comes out, where are we shovel ready to get that done? I don't want to lead the department heads down the path of the want that turns into the wish list potentially, that I want them focused on the actual need that they need, because I think that's where you're at. And then with regard, I think with regard to the other things, I think that all meshes together. I think you guys have meshed together more so than not. And then the last thing I would say is, Rob, I'd be more than happy to chat with you by phone or what have you to walk you through at least what has happened the last couple of years, including a year the board didn't like what I did because things were late, but that was changes in department heads for the most part. But I think where we've come up, where I think there are some successes in the discussion, and maybe where some things that I've heard that could be new, or at least bring you up to speed with regard to the process that we typically go through. And that may change based on when things get to you, but at least I can give you some history from that. And then Rob also do you have a budget book? I can't remember if Pepper turned his in to give to you or not. Have you received a big thick binder? Okay.
I don't remember.
Okay, it would have, you would have known it. But there's a big thick binder that has essentially a sheet of paper for every line item with some justification, past numbers on it, as well as the proposed numbers, and then there's a master spreadsheet that goes with it that looks a lot like what's in the town report. So if you haven't received that, that's something I need to work with you and get you at least an understanding, at least have you look at mine to see what comes forward, so you'll understand what's coming forward. There are some board members that like the copious amount of information that comes, and then there are other board members that may be more happier with the matrix. But I at least find, and my department heads find, that with the bulk of the information that they have, it's a nice reference tool during the course of a year.
Roger, you had a point?
So.
Yeah, I think just in terms of the wants, just to like, if I may try to clarify a little bit of John's point, like if the want is that it drastically improves services for our citizens, I think that is something that is really worthy of putting forward. If the want is that it drastically improves the work or the workload of our employees, I also want to hear about that, because we are very, very nimble in terms of number of employees as from where I stand. And, I think like that Zoom account, we gotta upgrade it. Like no more of like Miranda being, for example, this like watchdog. So I think that's a small example of, if there's costs or automation, if you will, that will improve like the working situation of the employees. I also want to hear about that. So services that improve our lives as our citizens as a want, that's great. And then also improves the workload of the employees so they can go on to do more work or different work, then that would also, I also would be open to that as like the kind of wants, if that provides clarity and wants.
Yep. No, thank you. And that's, for me, from my standpoint, I'm already banking on the fact that you're never going to be able to stop using Zoom. When you come back to the meeting room, you will have Zoom continuing, because there's too much luxury, for lack of a better word, for people to, this is exactly what Pepper and Langus talked about when they first came on the board, is how to get people more involved in the select board in a real-time situation. The Zoom has done it for you under COVID. So I don't think you're going to be able to go away from that. We just have to figure out how not to have the echo in the room with you guys.
Well, good luck on that.
Any other comment? Any other comment on John's memo?
My only comment was what I said earlier, where I would like the manifestation of something like that. I would, one should be a working group to form around the green fleet infrastructure. I think Hartford has done a lot of work in this regard. I think someone could potentially reach out to Dan Fraser, who's the chair in Hartford, and like ask him how that's going. And they have a climate group separate from their energy committee that is also being charged with looking at that. So something that, that establishes, I like it. I think like Coletta, I think you would even really like this, because it it'll have an exemption process that really asks a lot of questions that need to be answered about what cars are being proposed, or what vehicles are being proposed. So I think that is one output for John's treatise.
So would either you or John like to start up that group?
I would certainly be interested in leading the, putting together a group to think about these issues, presumably with a member or two of the Energy Committee and then a couple of citizens at large to talk about that. I mean, I think the biggest question is whether we want to have that group look at capital budgeting generally and have this as a subset of what they're looking at. My focus obviously was addressing specifically the aftermath of the revote, and what I was proposing we do about the mandate to reduce fossil fuel emissions 5% per year. But I'm happy to, I mean, I think it's hard to talk about that in a vacuum without talking about it in the context of the general capital budget. So I'd be happy for that working group to be tasked with looking at all of them.
Roger, go ahead, and then Rob.
Well, my question is, maybe you were putting it forward, Claudette, to Herb. So Herb, if you were to convene, so let's say we just identified green technologies, a green infrastructure as a question for capital budgeting. Let's say that we've just identified that as a priority. I'm assuming we have consensus, but maybe I'm wrong. And then how is that something where you can convene like this to be sort of, it would obviously inform this next budget cycle, but it probably would be a longer project. Obviously the Energy and Finance Committee would be good representation to have. But what are your thoughts on that as a thing? That would be my question. Claudette, to ask her.
So based on my experience with the sitting board, the couple sitting boards I've had to deal with so far, I try to do that already with regard to at least fleet, and looking into different options. But in terms, and I have no problem where, say, there's a preface to a capital budget and program that says any expenditure here under, needs to have some consideration. As for instance, the state of Vermont with I'm drawing a blank right now.
The legislation.
The purchasing grant, they already had, that is part of the policy of their purchasing, and when they go out to bid for things, it has to be included as part of, say, RFPs and everything that go out there. So they've incorporated that in there. I have no problem dealing with that. But it would be helpful to have a group that is clearly got experience, because I'm not going to say I'm experienced in the green industry from that standpoint. But if there's a group that said, or that was sort of one or two board members, couple Energy Committee members, a couple citizens group, and I would say at least a member, at least say the chair of the Finance Committee, if you're going to get into that sort of stuff to figure that out, the input that they could throw my way would certainly be appreciated and probably helpful in guiding what needs to go. Because I mean, sitting here, John Langus can tell me, 3 million things to how to do something with regard to the budget and all that I just don't have the experience for, because that's what he does for a living. So I would appreciate that kind of input, and we're open to it. And I think department heads are as well from that standpoint. But there is a balance for a period of time with regard to the allowance of future technology to catch up with us versus getting something new. So having some of that discussion about how do we get from point A to point B, where, say, it may not be feasible to do an electrical 6-yard dump truck today. We know it's coming down the road someday, but what would be the strategy to get to that level would be helpful input.
And the policy would talk about a situation like that. right? So it would be really clear. Mary has her hand up, Claudia.
I would just like the.
Oh, wait. Sorry, Mary. Rob.
Yeah, go ahead.
Rob was first.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, Mary. A lot of the discussion at last night's Energy Committee wrote in the discussion of the Green Fleet transition and how there's a lot of technology that's becoming tantalizingly close, much closer than people had anticipated. Retrofits to trucks that use electric and a variety of other movement in the area. But it's going to add some of that initial cost that has to be accommodated in the budget somewhere to recognize that this is a useful and necessary initial higher expense that probably does have a payback. So planning for some of these unexpected, earlier than expected opportunities is something that we got to cover.
That's with that climate energy. Did that pass last year at town meeting? The $40,000. Yeah. So that sort of caught that fund is partly to say, hey, if it's $4,000 more to get a hybrid cruiser to then a regular just gas powered, that $4,000 could come out of that fund to help offset the cost of moving toward green.
Well, not yet, because we haven't written the criteria for which that money
yeah,
can be
sorry,
used.
Sorry, but yeah,
That's been in the parking lot. Okay, so
Mary.
just to wrap. Oh, sorry, Mary. Apologies.
It's okay. I would like to just not forget sidewalks, because I think they're part of being green, and that people are walking or riding their bike rather than using a vehicle in the first place. I think we do need them. I wonder whether we need a policy similar to what was worked out with the Marcan report for roads, where there's a certain density where you are going to want sidewalks, or certain places where you might want to loop, but you can't build them out everywhere. And also, we know that some of them are deteriorating and we need to keep them up. And we have talked about perhaps merging with the fire district and accommodating those sidewalks too. I just don't want to lose sight of that. And, you know, if we are talking 5 years, 10 years, I think there just should be some sort of long-term plan and some kind of perhaps even a policy about how much of that, what the network should be and what the maintenance of them should be.
Well, it's all going to get down to how we as a board prioritize the capital improvement plan.
Exactly. I just think there is a lot of, you know, there are a lot of needs, and I would like to get, just not leave something out because it's not that exciting. It doesn't mean we'd actually do it, but I don't think it should be excluded in our, you know, in our consideration.
So wrapping this up, do we work on the budget and the capital improvement plan first, or do we put that, have John be the lead on putting that green fleet group together to work at the same time as the budget and CIP are worked on? That's a question to the.
I think they're two working groups, and I think they should be convened by Herb.
Okay.
What does everyone else think?
I'm okay with that.
I agree. I think that's fine.
That's Mary or Rob?
I don't know. I'm feeling a little mind boggled by trying to sort it out. I've been thinking about it as, you know, if you could move big blocks around on on a whiteboard and you knew the costs and you could fit it all together and project it over the 5 years, you know, it'd be, I just can't visualize it, how it's going to work.
Well, there are other towns that have facilitated meetings that deal with capital improvement.
Have you observed
Only.
any of those meetings? Or?
The Hartford board has done that for the past few years.
But have you observed the process at all?
Not enough to facilitate it, no.
But enough that you think it's helpful?
Oh, absolutely.
But my thinking is like, let's get a potentially, I'm like, you know, I'm saying Herb has to convene it, so I don't know what it would look like. So assuming Herb agrees that it makes sense, maybe convene the group, see how they expand and are thoughtful, or else how they implode, and then we'll go from, you know, we'll see it. I think like we need to start talking in ways that don't have silos. I think we learned some silos exist when we were talking about the MOU stuff earlier, where it was just like, we need to work it. Working groups is where the work happens. I know that there's now some fear around what that looks like, but I think working groups is where you work. Meetings are where you talk. We need to work.
Okay.
So one group I'm very clear with is that, and that's the Green Fleet. What would the second group be doing, Roger?
I think that's like a larger capital budgeting, like I think they are sort of tasked with thinking about some other questions that might emerge from capital budgeting. So Green Fleet infrastructure is a question of capital budgeting. Sidewalks sounds like it's another question of, so I think like maybe the capital budgeting group convened by Herb can sort of identify like the workflow for like additional work. I'm a process person, so this might sound overwrought, but I think like one group is like sort of the capital budgeting process where they like start talking and figure out the bigger buckets, the smaller buckets. And then I think in this meeting, we've identified Green Fleet, Green Transportation as one of those buckets.
Also the IT, don't forget that.
Yeah, and that sounds like it's a little more worked along and maybe, you know, at a point where we don't need a working group, but maybe it does. I don't know. Certainly a website, right? Like might require like a working group potentially.
So
but,
why would you want a working group for the CIP instead of just the select board getting together to work on the CIP?
We could
identify those.
We could do a special meeting, but I think we won't have the benefit of figuring out like how, like questions around like how to take on debt or when not to take on debt, right? Which is something that a finance committee might be able to advise us on, or something like, well, can you use corn oil? Like you know, that's something the energy committee might know. So we risk being siloed and a little bit. But I'm also recognizing that the convener of this would be Herb, and he might, you know, find all of this too much. I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Can I interject a little bit?
Sure.
So I don't have a big issue with regard to the working group on the Green Fleet. I get that. Just the caveat to this is that the department heads and I are amidst preparing budgets and capital budget related stuff with the deadline of getting something to you. You know, I'm going to be giving you a budget at the first meeting in November, if not earlier. I can tell you it was just like any year, it's still going to be that first meeting in November rather than earlier. But the capital budgeting process, I have regular check-in meetings with the chair of the finance committee. And I think that that's the committee that is really the working group with regard to the capital budget and program at a higher level, because I know how to put a capital budget and program together. My department heads know what their particular needs are. There's some updated inventories and statuses such as sidewalks and stuff that need to occur, but we know how to do that aspect of it. What Emmanuel and I have talked about is the finance committee can help in understanding the longer term needs of everything. What might be the ceiling of a designated fund that we need to deal with, and what are the things that are coming down the road. So I'm not opposed to a working group, but I would say that the finance committee would be a good group to, you know, sort of assign that task with. And Emmanuel and he already understands, I think, what you folks are looking for. So I would even, ask them to help you out with that type of visioning strategic process, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, I mean, I think like it should really begin from a place of like understanding shared values and understanding, not so much, take all the chips and put them together and see like how you can fund it, which I agree is like maybe more of a finance committee. But I guess I'm going to step back because I think I'm adding confusion to the process. I think like I said that, Herb, you should convene these groups and to address potential silos. If you feel like it will be cumbersome, then by all means, it sounds like you have an endorsement of a sort of a green fleet working group. And, I think like with the CIP process, so much of it is about not even priorities, but just like envisioning what kind of like long-term community you want to have, which I think like certainly elected officials have, but like also like other people in other places. But like maybe we skip that part.
I think it's way too, part of my bias is that it's trying to change how we're approaching the capital budget this year. It's way too late in the year to be looking to change how we're approaching the capital budget.
Totally, you're right.
So
but
that's my bias. So
if I have a working group on that, I go into panic mode. Just because for exactly what Claudette just talked about. And again, I'm more than happy to have that kind of a working group that talks about the process and everything that the more, as Roger's talking about, more at the policy level than the logistics of it. But I right now I'm full mode into getting a budget done and for you folks for the beginning.
And maybe it should be next spring when we look to incorporate, because we need to bring the town plan into all of that as well.
Yep.
So it's not something that's gonna probably happen for this fiscal year or this upcoming budget season. But if I'm in full support of her bringing together that Green Fleet group, if that works for everybody.
Okay.
Are we done with this? I'm not sure we really accomplished much, but I guess I'm wanting. I'm comfortable with what was said in the action.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then we're going to move on to the bank loan for financing the construction of the Charles Brown Brook Bridge. Is there a motion?
Yeah, I'll do it. I move to authorize the town manager to execute loan paperwork with Northfield Savings Bank to procure a 5-year loan for $65,700 at a fixed interest rate of 2.25% per annum, beginning July 2nd, 2021, and due each July 1st thereafter, for construction of the Brown Schoolhouse Road Bridge.
Is there a second?
Second.
So the motion was made by Mary, seconded by Rob. Any further discussion?
But there's just a little error I just noticed it. It should say July 1, 2021, not July 2, 2021. That's just a technical change.
Okay. And no further discussion? Okay, we'll roll call. Rob, how do you vote?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And Claudette's a yes. Sorry, just had a shiver. Moving on to the town manager update. Herb put in a written report in the packet. Any questions for the town manager? Any comments about the report or its format? Roger?
How are you gonna? My only question is how what will the next one look like, Herb? Because I noticed you put your updates in red and like in a column. Like how will you keep this going organically?
So the idea is to keep it in red. So it's very similar to the way that I've learned from COVID, like the Department of Health, every time there's something new, it's in red. So if there's language that stays the same, it will then go to black. But anything new that I put in there will be red. What I ultimately want to have in here is showing progress. So whether that's extending it a little bit to show a little bit of a Gantt chart or what have you, I'd like to be able to do that. The other thing is that as you get used to this, I still think there's additional information that you would like to have from me, not the gory detail diary of what I'm doing, but some of the highlights of the things, because this doesn't reflect, some of the highlights of the things that I've dealt with over the, since the last report came out. And that's my concern, is that I'm trying to change the town report, besides just giving you a report, is to make sure that it's meaningful for you folks. So that's why I changed to this process for the things that are out there that I've been tasked with doing. But I'm concerned that if I don't have some of that other stuff from previous reports, that at some point I might be accused of not telling you what's going on from that standpoint. So I think there's a blending somewhere of the two, and that's where I would love to get the feedback. But organically, yes, and I'm happy to receive feedback as to how you would like to see this improved or changed, because that's something that I think about is, okay, this time was really easy, just put the new stuff in red, but what's going to happen next time? Again, I think that it's updated, and where the appropriate updates are, that's what you would see as red stuff as each coming month comes by.
So I think, as a suggestion, Herb, one thing, I think the format is thorough, but I think like one thing, for instance, is I think we might be owed an update on the grants and aid project, because the scope of that changed a little bit. I don't know if the full board is aware. And so can you give us that update? And I think that's an example of where taking that out of the report and like putting it in like a little, I don't want to say a little memo, but that might be helpful, because that's something we took a prior action on, right? And now like we need an update on. So I think my question is, can you update us about the grants and aid project and how it's 2 instead of 3 now? And then we'll get to my other suggestion. If you feel like you want to comment on that, you can.
Sure. So as quickly as I can, the grant and aid went out to bid. There was an apparent low bidder. You folks, based on the recommendation of my staff, you guys agreed to go with that contractor for the 3 projects on 3 different roads that we were talking about. When there was additional discussion with the contractor, the selected contractor at that point, they reported they could not do the work to the extent that we had talked about. So what I asked Larry to do was to go to the next lowest responsible bidder and say, is your bid still whole from that standpoint? And they indicated that they could do the project, but it resulted in the ability to keep it on budget, we basically had to reduce it from 3 separate projects to 2 separate projects. And the deadline of getting the work done is looming very quickly. And so basically had to work with some board members offline to say, would you be accepting of this so that we could move it forward? So we did move forward with that input. We did get the group on board. They're starting up very shortly this week. And then with the idea of keeping it on task, we've had additional discussion with the Regional Planning Commission in terms of when the actual work has to be done versus invoices in the door from that standpoint. And we do know that the work has to be done by the date that was set, but that the invoices can come in after that deadline. We were nervous that the invoices had to all be in before the deadline as well, but that's relaxed a little bit in understanding. So the update is that 2 of the 3 And I think, and the part that's not being done is the upper turnpike portion. So the work will be done, and then we'll get the reimbursement for the work that was done based according to the grant terms.
Thanks. That was great.
Did you have another comment, Roger?
Well, I had a suggestion, but I can take that offline with Herb and see what he thinks. I think just for when things are substantial, like, or where you wanted to provide more of elaborate reasoning, or I would just want to let you, if you wanted to do a memo ever on things that were in the town manager's report about like that explains some of your larger thinking, or maybe then I'm also in favor of that happening, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So don't feel confined to the little squares. Is what I'm saying. If you feel like there's something you want to talk, like prepare at greater depth.
Yep. But also I would appreciate the prompts from the board. So as like you asked about grants and aid tonight, if there's something that pops up, shoot me a quick email to say, hey, Herb, can you give an update on this, like union contract or something like that? You know, what's the status of that? I would appreciate that prompt, because then I know what's on your mind in terms of an issue to think about, not just relying on me to think about what you want to hear about. That would be really helpful for me.
Cool.
Any other board comments? I just have a couple. It seems like the update column, does the width of the general action or the task, it's some of the August update issues we're running seem to be merging together with the one previous or the one below, and the spacing is just made it a little difficult for me to read. And then I was wondering if if that list, if you can either identify in that list what the priorities are in each section, or overall provide us with what you see are the priorities in that grand list. That's kind of something that I would like to see, a prioritization of it.
Okay, and that's just, it's a look, I think to a degree that's in there. I mean, there's a couple different things that are merged in the same thing. So obviously there's the stuff that relates to my personal improvement plan. Personally, that's the top priority for me. But in terms of priority for the town, that may not be as much of a priority, but those items are in there from that standpoint. There's also the identification of the town plan items, and the town plan identifies in the implementation the particular date that they're looking for. So that's why the year is in there. So I'm assuming that what I'm doing is I'm assuming that the priority that's there is appropriate for what the town had, since that's the adopted town plan. And then the town base?
I think Claudette's just saying, like, in each of the sections, if you could prioritize, like if you were to like just prioritize each of them. So like per section.
And then I could pick, okay, so you've identified this in each section as your top priority.
Sure. Okay.
Then I can see what work is being reflected to address that priority.
Fair enough. Yeah,
So.
Okay. I may have some further discussion with you just to clarify, but.
Okay.
Thank
So
you.
if there are no further questions or comments from the board, we will move on to executive session. And
Sorry, I did have one further thing in the report right at the very end. So you had you had as part of the report the draft amendment from Solaflect. I didn't know whether you were proposing that as something that you intended to enter into, or if that was just an FYI and it's an ongoing discussion, but since that was a detailed discussion a couple meetings ago, I thought that might be worth a little bit of a briefing on.
Sorry, yeah, it took me a second. I thought you were talking about in my specific report, not the other stuff. So the based on your last meeting or the meeting before, you're talking about the net metering arrangement, Langus. So there were two issues that were identified. One was it did not locate in Norwich, and the other was I'm drawing a blank on the other, but there was the possibility of
buyout option for the town.
Thank you, the buyout option. I had reached out with Linda Gray's help to Bill Bender to say, can we get together about these two particular issues? Bill offered to use his time to draft a couple changes. Those were forwarded to me, and those I had had given that to you as part of this particular packet. Along the way, Linda Gray had offered to have Eric, who's on the Energy Committee, to review it for content. So I agreed to do that. And then there was some question as to why we wouldn't have the town attorney do that. I'm not opposed to that, but I wanted to get the information to you to see if what you wanted to do was either move forward with that, to have it reviewed by town attorney, you were good with it. So that's the reason for providing you the information that I had.
Pam Smith has her hand up. Claudette.
Go ahead, Pam.
Yeah, I would just like to see us audit this agreement from day one. There's been no oversight on this for 7 years. So I think it would be appropriate to have an independent third party, perhaps our own auditor, look at what have we paid and what did we agree to pay, and do they coincide? I don't think we should do any amendments to this contract until we really understand our position on the financial side of this agreement. Would the board be opposed to doing an audit from day one?
I'm not prepared to discuss that at this point, but John has his hand up.
So there's been a few suggestions around this, and it seems to always go back to the same confusion about whether we've saved money in line with what people were promised. Are you questioning whether we didn't get, so the way that the system works, right, is that the meters of the town that are subscribed to this garden get net metering credits on the bill from GMP, and then the town pays for those credits at a discount. So basically you're buying dollars for 90 cents, right? That's the contract. It's a contract for 90-cent dollars.
Right.
And
So I'm
actually,
asking,
maybe an 8% discount. But so are you questioning whether we've gotten the net metering credits that we've paid for? Because a lot of the suggestion has been that this was supposed to save us money on our energy budget, which is not really the correct way to think about this kind of contract.
I think that the fact that this has turned out so differently from what was on paper, that we also need to look at the financial side of this to just see, where do we come out on this? Did we get the 7% discount? Did we not? Are we saving money? Look at all of those aspects. I think before you amend an agreement that has been so flawed, that you should really look at this, the financial side of this, and just have a lot of knowledge on where we stand.
It will be coming up on the entire discussion will be coming up probably at a future agenda, whether it's the next or the one after that. It's not, it wasn't on this agenda because actually, I don't know if I was under the assumption that we would get more from the Energy Committee. And can I tell you exactly what I thought we would get from the Energy Committee? No.
Well, Linda's talking about going back 2 years on the Green Mountain Power bills, and this is a 7-year-old agreement. We've never done any oversight on this agreement from day one, and it wasn't until recently that this even became an issue. We've just been kind of bouncing along with a very flawed arrangement that does not reflect what's on paper. And so I think that before we sign any amendments, I would like to see us get a full accounting of where we stand.
And that's part of the discussion it'll be, again, as I mentioned, either on the next agenda or the agenda after that, what we're gonna do now, whether it's gonna.
So are you telling me that you're gonna hold off on doing any amendments? Is that what I can take away from
I'm
that?
saying that it will be, the topic in general will be up before the select board. There was also some work, I think, that Linda was doing in looking at some of those financials, I thought.
It was going back 2 years, not 7.
So I hear what you're saying, Pam.
I would just like assurances from the select board that they're not authorizing any amendments until.
I can't make that assurance right now. It's not up right now for vote. So I can't speak for everybody else, but I can't make that assurance.
Well, you can. Herb is not taking any action. If that's helpful.
Okay, that is helpful. Thank you.
So okay, yeah, John.
So Pam is purporting to know what sort of oversight's been going on this contract, which I can't fathom why she would presume to know that. We do have a town manager in our meeting here, so I would assume that, as with all of our bills, that when we pay our bill every month, that GMP bill is looked at, because it's very clear. I get these every month, right? It's very clear. You see on your bill how many net metering credits you get, right? There's like 8 or 9 meters. So is it correct or not correct that part of every month when we pay our bill to Solaflect, we look at those bills and we say, okay, we got this many net metering credits, and yes, it's correct that we're going to pay for those now. Because you can't not get the discount, right? That's
John,
what drives me insane
John,
about
yeah, but there have been certain amendments to the billing that have been made over the past couple of years that drastically increased the amount we were paying. And I would have to
not per credit.
I don't know what. Herb, correct me if I'm mistaken. Were there or not a couple of times that there were amended bills that came from from somebody? And I think it was Solarflect.
There's one specific bill that what happened when the original information was set up, Solarflect did not charge us the full amount that they were supposed to be charging us. So that's been corrected after some negotiation with Bill, Linda, and myself, and that was probably a year and a half ago, maybe. And then, but there's been no changes since then. But at the end of each year, there's a rectification that occurs that comes via the invoice to basically justify what was intended, what was actually done, and if there's a net change, whether there's a stranded cost or realization, then that's factored in essentially in the last bill of the year.
And there's correspondence about this in the packet, because I wrote to her following this when it came up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe we should just ask Manu to ask the finance committee if they would like to go through this history.
Linda is doing that.
Sounds like there's at least one member of the committee that would be willing to spend some time going through that.
What were you saying, Roger?
Linda Gray has volunteered to look at the GMP bill. Apparently it's 2 years. The work has been moved. So I think we should maybe see what that work looks like. And then if we need to escalate it either to the finance committee or to our lawyer or whatever, then we decide on that as a future agenda item.
So anyway, it's not a forgotten agenda item. It just, the information was not available to have it on today's agenda. So I'm going to move us forward to the executive session. And the motion does not quite match what the agenda item is. It was to review the improvement plan and the evaluation tool. Roger, you look very cute.
Sorry, I'm hooded.
So is there anybody willing to make that motion? If not, we'll see how it goes. I'll make a motion. I move to enter executive session under VSA section 313A3 to discuss the town manager evaluation and the evaluation tool, and to potentially invite Cheryl Lindbergh, our treasurer, and Herb Durfee, our town manager, into the discussion.
Point of order. Why would the treasurer be involved in my evaluation? That's a matter of personnel.
Right.
It is potentially for providing us with some information. Asking her some questions.
I would prefer to have that session an open session if you're going to go that route.
Mary, I think you were talking. You're muted.
Yeah, I feel a bit uncomfortable with the idea of inviting our town treasurer into the executive session.
Okay. Anybody else? So I'll rephrase the motion. How's that? I would, let me find my language. I would move to enter executive session under VSA section 313A3 to discuss the town manager evaluation and the evaluation tool. Is there a second?
But not invite the town manager?
Well, we're kind of off cycle. We can, and potentially invite the town manager. I'll add that.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. So,
okay.
Well, roll call. Sorry. John?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So we will move into executive session at 9:17 with just us first. That's okay?
Yeah, I'll put everyone else into the waiting room.
Thank you. Can I take 2 seconds?
Yes.
I'll be right back. Okay, is there a motion to enter public session?
I so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
I think Rob got you that time, John. So roll call, Mary?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
And Claudette's a yes. And I think our next item is, does anybody want to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Rob? You're muted.
He's already left.
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you in a
Thanks,
couple
guys.
weeks.
Bye.
Right.